You've seen the clips. They've become their own genre, their own algorithmic bait. The camera is close, always close, usually inside a car. The modern confession booth. A woman is crying because she had to take her child to the doctor alone. Next video, tears because groceries and daycare don't fit into the family budget anymore. Next, a pipe bursts, water spreads, and she's in full panic because she doesn't know who to call, what to shut off, or what order to do anything in. Most people scroll past it like it's just content. But if you zoom out, it's not random. It's a cultural symptom. It's the same emotional collapse repeating in different costumes. And the uncomfortable truth is this: a lot of adults today are not breaking down because life is uniquely cruel. They're breaking down because they were trained to expect life to be easy, as long as they felt free. Freedom was sold as a feeling. Independence was marketed like a vibe. And then, reality arrived with invoices, deadlines, sick kids, broken appliances, and zero interest in anyone's internal narrative. Real adulthood is not a highlight reel. It's not a self-discovery montage. It's infrastructure. It's systems. It's competence. It's knowing what to do when you don't feel like doing anything. And for a growing number of people, that muscle is underdeveloped. Now, let me say this clearly before you misunderstand the point. This isn't women bad. This isn't a hate monologue. There are women who are strong, competent, calm under pressure, and built for real partnership. And there are men who are weak, chaotic, and addicted to drama. This is not a gender purity test. What we're talking about is a modern pattern that shows up more visibly in women online because that's where the incentive structure lives. The breakdown is rewarded. The spiral is validated. The performance is monetized. And when a culture pays people for emotional collapse, it will eventually produce more emotional collapse. So let's break down what's actually happening. From a psychological perspective, this is an expectation gap, a massive gap between the adult load someone signed up for and the adult load reality delivers. The script repeats with scary consistency. A woman leaves a stable situation, sometimes a marriage, sometimes a long-term relationship, sometimes just a structured life, and she's convinced that without the burden of a partner, her existence will become brighter, lighter, more authentic. She tells herself she's choosing herself. She tells herself she's reclaiming her identity. She tells herself she's stepping into power. And sometimes she is. Sometimes leaving is necessary. Sometimes the relationship was toxic, abusive, or dead. But here's the part nobody wants to talk about. In a lot of cases, what she's really leaving isn't just a man. She's leaving a system, a second set of hands, a stabilizing presence, a structure that carried weight she didn't fully calculate because she didn't have to. And when the initial dopamine of freedom burns off, reality shows up like a debt collector. I watched something like this happen through someone I knew. Let's call her Nadia. She left her husband, Mark, not a perfect man, but a decent man, reliable, consistent, showed up, paid bills, took responsibility. She said she felt caged. She wanted to find herself. She wanted passion. She wanted a life that felt like more. 6 months later, the self she found was exhausted. Not because she didn't have potential, not because she wasn't smart, but because potential is not the same thing as capacity. Capacity is built through repetition, structure, and responsibility. And when you've been living inside a system that quietly absorbs pressure, you don't understand how heavy the pressure actually is until you're carrying it alone. Nadia's car needed a major repair. Transmission, Big money. She didn't know which shop to trust. She didn't know the questions to ask. She didn't have a network of people who could point her in the right direction. She got overcharged. Then she got behind on bills. Then the stress started bleeding into parenting. Then the kids started acting out. Then everything became an emergency. And here's what most people don't understand: the hardships that break people are rarely dramatic tragedies. Most breakdowns aren't triggered by one catastrophic event. They're triggered by the grind. The relentless, boring, unglamorous grind that seems simple only as long as someone else is quietly doing half of it. Grocery shopping with two kids when one is hungry and the other is melting down. Carrying heavy furniture alone because there's no second body. Negotiating with contractors who smell uncertainty and charge you extra for your desperation. Being sick with a fever and still having to function at full capacity because there is no backup anymore. No relief valve, no second adult to tap in. For a prepared adult, that's not trauma, that's Tuesday. But without a support system, Tuesday turns into a cliff. And this brings us to a concept nobody wants to say out loud because it sounds judgmental. Independence has a cost, not a motivational quote, cost, a real cost. Independence is not just, I can do what I want. Independence is, I am responsible for everything I have. It means when you are exhausted, you still cook. When you are overwhelmed, you still parent. When you are emotionally drained, you still manage logistics. When the pipes burst at midnight, you don't get to freeze. You have to move. People love the aesthetic of independence. They love the identity label. They don't love the contract. One of my clients, Jason, told me something that stayed with me. His ex-wife initiated divorce. She moved out with the kids. She presented the whole thing like empowerment, strong woman, new chapter, fresh start. She posted the right quotes. She smiled in pictures. She performed victory. 3 months later, the performance cracked. She called him late at night in a full panic. Basement flooding. She didn't know where the main shutoff was. Kids scared. She was spiraling. Jason drove across town, fixed it, calmed the situation, and left. And as he walked out, he said something that hit hard. She didn't want partnership. She wanted the option to leave partnership, but still wanted partnership to show up when reality hit. That is the modern contradiction. A lot of people want the benefits of a stable structure without the humility required to maintain it. They want reliability without reciprocity, protection without loyalty, someone to hold the frame while they keep the freedom to test boundaries. And when that's your mindset, adulthood will punish you, not because the world is mean, but because the world is indifferent. Now, add the online incentive layer and you get something even stranger. Demonstrative vulnerability, public breakdown as identity, crying as currency. Today, any difficulty can be turned into content. The tears get attention. The attention becomes dopamine. The dopamine becomes a reinforcement. And the brain learns a dangerous lesson. If I fall apart publicly, I get rewarded. That doesn't build resilience. It builds dependency. I saw a clip of a woman crying because daycare costs almost as much as her salary. That's real pressure. That's not a joke. But what matters is the response pattern, because you know who else faces these numbers? Single fathers, men with full custody, men juggling work, and kids with no safety net. They exist, and there are more of them than people admit. But their behavioral response is usually different. Not because men are superheroes, not because men don't feel stress, but because men are trained early that the world doesn't care how they feel. So they convert stress into action. They take extra shifts. They cut expenses. They call family. They solve. They don't set up a tripod and cry because they don't get rewarded for crying. They get punished for it. And that reveals the real cultural imbalance. We've created a world where female distress is treated like a communal emergency, and male distress is treated like a personal failure. That double standard doesn't help women either, because it trains some of them to stay fragile. It trains them to externalize responsibility. It trains them to seek rescue instead of building capacity. And here's what men need to understand: the invisible structure that a masculine presence often provides is not just financial, it's psychological. A stable man isn't just a wallet, he's a container. He brings routine, he brings boundaries, he brings a willingness to be unpopular in the short term to protect the long term stability of the household. A lot of homes don't collapse from lack of love, they collapse from lack of structure. Without structure, entropy wins. Kids push limits. Fatigue rises. The parent who wants peace starts negotiating instead of enforcing. The home becomes emotionally reactive instead of principled. And children don't need more gentle explanations. They need consistent architecture. I've heard teachers say this without trying to start a gender war. Kids from father absent homes often show up disoriented, not because the mother doesn't love them. She often loves them deeply. But love is not the same as leadership. And one adult carrying every role burns out: provider, nurturer, enforcer, planner, protector. Cognitive bandwidth gets overloaded. The home becomes unstable. The child absorbs that instability. So when people say, it takes a village, they're not being poetic. They're stating a biological and logistical truth. Humans were not built to raise children alone in isolated apartments while also doing full-time work and managing adult infrastructure. And yet, modern culture sells exactly that life as empowerment, then acts shocked when the people living it start collapsing. Now, let's talk about hypersensitivity, because this is another key piece. We've trained people to treat feelings like the ultimate authority. If I feel bad, someone wronged me. If I'm stressed, something is unfair. If I'm frustrated, it must be oppression. That mindset turns ordinary friction into moral injury. So instead of dealing with the task, the person becomes consumed by the emotion about the task. They don't fix the issue. They perform suffering around it. I watched a woman create a full scene at a repair shop because a repair took 2 hours instead of one. Tears, calls, angry posts. This is ruining my whole day. Meanwhile, a man in the same chair would open his laptop, drink coffee, and clear his inbox. That's not because men are emotionless. It's because men are trained to conserve emotional energy for real emergencies. When your baseline is resilience, a delay is a delay. When your baseline is fragility, a delay becomes a catastrophe. And here's the line that matters: we are drowning in feelings while starving for competence. Competence is boring. Competence doesn't get likes. Competence isn't dramatic. Competence is quiet. It's knowing how to shut off the water. It's having savings. It's having a plan. It's having routines that prevent small problems from becoming huge ones. Most breakdowns are simply the compound interest of bad habits. When you look closely at the people who claim they're always overwhelmed, you often see a life lived in reaction mode. No budgeting, so every bill is a surprise. No routines, so every morning is the chaos. No planning, so every inconvenience becomes a crisis. No discipline, so health becomes emergency management instead of maintenance. This isn't bad luck. It's a lack of structure. I knew someone like this, Let's call her Elena. Constant complaints about money, constant stress, constant crisis. But her spending on food delivery, cosmetic maintenance, and little dopamine purchases was quietly massive. Then rent day arrives, and suddenly it's an emergency. She needs help. She needs sympathy. She needs a bailout. That is not an economy problem. That is an impulse controlled problem. And it exposes something deeper, an allergy to responsibility. Because responsibility requires admitting, I did this. My choices created this. Victimhood requires only pointing outward. The job, the government, the ex, the system. Everyone is failing her, except the one person who could actually change the outcome. Now, here's where it becomes tragic, because the collateral damage is often the children. When an adult can't regulate themselves, the child becomes the regulator. This is parentification. You see it when a young boy becomes the emotional anchor for his mother, listening to her vent about men. You see it when a young girl becomes the second parent, cooking, cleaning, managing younger siblings, because mom is overwhelmed. That child loses childhood. They become a caregiver before they're developed enough to be one. And later, they either become hyper responsible adults with anxiety, or they swing the other direction and reject responsibility entirely. So when we talk about adults collapsing, we're not just talking about the adult, we're talking about the next generation learning what adulthood looks like. Now let's address the statistic people dance around. Most divorces are initiated by women. That does not automatically mean women are wrong. Sometimes women leave because the marriage is genuinely unhealthy, but it does mean something culturally important. A lot of women are choosing to trade stability for a feeling. The feeling might be freedom. The feeling might be passion. The feeling might be, I deserve more. And again, sometimes that's true. But the problem is when the decision is made under the illusion that stability is boring and boredom is oppression. When the decision is made based on thrill rather than long-term math. When the decision is made with no respect for the infrastructure that was keeping life manageable. Because here's what real life teaches with zero empathy. Feelings do not pay bills. Fantasy does not raise resilient children. Aesthetic does not protect you at 2 a.m. when life breaks something. This is why you're seeing a wave of regret content, not always spoken as regret, but you can hear it between the tears. I didn't know it would be like this. What they mean is, I didn't calculate the cost. Now let's talk to men directly, because this matters for your life choices. A lot of men have an instinct to rescue. You see a woman crying, your body wants to fix. It's protective wiring. You want to pay the bill, fix the tire, solve the problem, calm the chaos. And in the right situation, when a woman is responsible, competent, and simply having a hard moment, that instinct can build real trust and loyalty. But if you see a pattern of chronic incompetence, do not rescue it. Because you won't become her partner. You'll become her crutch. And a crutch is not respected. A crutch is leaned on. A crutch is expected. A crutch becomes invisible until it's gone. And then it's blamed for not being there. If she collapses every time life asks for basic adulthood, that's not softness. That's liability. And a man who builds his life on liabilities will eventually resent his own choices. This is why decent men withdraw. Not because they hate love, not because they fear commitment, but because they're watching the market carefully and they're seeing too many people who want the benefits of partnership without the discipline of partnership. The good deal is two adults building a system together. The bad deal is one adult carrying a system, while the other adult performs emotions about the system. So, what's the way out? Because complaining about it doesn't solve anything. The way out is a psychological shift from external control to internal control, from someone should save me to I handle what's mine, from my feelings are the truth to my actions create my reality. The mature adult doesn't broadcast pain as identity. They acknowledge pain, then move. They ask, what's the task? What's the next step? Who do I call? What do I learn? What system do I build so this doesn't happen again? That's sovereignty. That's adulthood. That's competence. And when someone truly makes that shift, something surprising happens. Life stabilizes. Not because life got easier, but because they got stronger. But here's the uncomfortable part. Most people won't choose this path. Because victimhood has benefits. Sympathy is addictive. Attention feels like support. And online platforms are factories for reinforcing helplessness. Previous generations didn't have this option. Your grandmother didn't have a comment section to rescue her ego. She had work to do, kids to feed, real scarcity, real hardship. Today's crisis is often a comfort crisis. When you remove real struggle, you lower your tolerance for friction. And then normal adulthood feels like oppression. So if you're a man watching all of this, here's the takeaway that protects your future. Stop selecting partners based on presentation. Select based on capacity. Don't date the aesthetic of softness. Date competence. Don't commit to someone because they look harmless. Commit to someone because they handle pressure. Don't build with someone who collapses under standard life tasks, then calls it trauma. Build with someone who knows how to regulate, plan, and execute. And if you're already in a relationship, watch the pattern. Does she solve or does she spiral? Does she take responsibility or does she outsource blame? Does she learn or does she repeat the same crisis every month like it's a ritual? Because your life will follow the quality of the person you attach it to. Let me end it like this. Reality is relentless. Bills don't care about your mood. Problems don't care about your identity. Life doesn't negotiate with your nervous system. It rewards adaptation, discipline, and competence. Independence is not a slogan. It's a lifestyle paid for with resilience. Partnership is not romance. It's an agreement to carry weight together. And if you're tired of watching adults turn normal life into a public meltdown, you're not crazy. You're just noticing the cost of a culture that rewards weakness and punishes responsibility. So I'll ask you a simple question. Have you seen this in real life? Have you watched someone trade a stable foundation for an illusion, then drown in the reality they demanded? And for the men, have you ever rescued a woman so many times you realized you weren't building a relationship? You were running a repair shop? Drop your observations in the comments. And if you want more conversations like this, no filters, no comforting lies, just the mechanics, subscribe. Because the world is full of easy narratives that keep people weak. Here, the goal is different. Responsibility, strength, clarity. The kind of clarity that makes you harder to manipulate and impossible to trap. See you in the next one.